Hey there, week 4, and it was kind of all over the place in terms of what was done, but a lot was done, so let's just dive straight in. So, as mentioned last week, I was still in the process of doing an audio draft, and I ended up becoming immensely hyper-focused and kind of put an additional 16 hours into setting up the foundations for Daniel, as well as setting up some future-proofing for the project in terms of setting up some scripts that randomize the time between random sounds being played in the environment, as well as setting up toggles for the interior and exterior using the attack, hold, decay, sustain, and release. Now, you can skip to about a minute ahead or so if you don't want to see or hear this, but here is an audio draft as it stands now. Whilst I was doing the constant testing of audio, I still noticed that I was getting a lot of draw calls and some dips in FPS. So I did some research into profiling and frame debugging, something that really hasn't been crossed off for me in the past. This was, however, really rewarding, and I found this incredibly stupid thing with the terrain. Now, by default, Unity renders the terrain via the CPU. And I get it, but at some point when you set the terrain's parameters of how large it is, that tick box should really be changed. And essentially, if you tick this box here, the terrain will get batched together and drawn via the GPU, essentially halving my draw calls, which is a really good lesson to have learnt. It might be a little bit late in my degree, but great nonetheless. Now, my audio guys, they were lagging a little bit behind in terms of what was getting done, and so I brought them into the fold in terms of how my game dev team do things, which is a weekly sprint and multiple scrums throughout the week just to make sure and get a pulse check to see how everyone's going. So we'll be carrying that on throughout the next week or so, but so far so good with how this method has been approached. Now, one of the biggest tasks that we're trying to get ready is implementing the tutorial. And whilst Darcy has been programming the functionality, I was writing the cues and creating the UI for the tutorial, as well as updating the project to have these assets ready for implementation next week. Once the voice lines were written for Mr. Crossy, I then used an Australian-made AI software to create some drafts for his voice. I then did a survey to get a consensus of what people preferred and felt matched the voice and visuals of Mr. Crossy, as well as his backstory and what he does. Overall, people were leaning towards voice 1 and voice 5 from our collection. Here is a very brief sample.
As you sleep, we play my game. You win my game. I remove this scar. You lose my game. And I will render this space a blank slate to move into.
As you sleep, we play my game. You win my game. I remove the scar. You lose my game. And I will render this space a blank slate to move into, removing every single memory, instead of just the ones that scar you.
From here, what I will do is supply these, as well as some other references to a voice actor, to really make this all become real. The last and final thing of the week was adding in some more assets, both exterior and interior, as well as some nature, so the team can start doing additional dressing of some of the external environment. Once this was done, I too started to do some exterior dressing myself, and the assets that were originally being used, as well as the newer ones, made some really great results. Overall, there's a lot to be done, and the main goal for next week and this upcoming week is the tutorial. We have everything made, we just need to put it together. So I would imagine by the middle of this upcoming week, we'll have something playable. See you next week.